Hi guys, welcome to Redbook Summer Beach Reads Book Club. I'm Tiffany Blackstone, and joining me today is Jennifer Weiner, author of the new book All Fall Down, which just hit shelves today.
Good morning.
And author Sarah Pekkanen, whose new book is Catching Air. If you want to ask them a question while we're live, please tweet us using the hashtag RBKBeachReads. Sitting to my left here is our senior web editor, Meg Foy.
Hey, everyone.
And Redbook editor, Hannah Hickok.
Hey, guys.
In San Francisco, we have Jessica Donahue, who's with Goodreads. Jessica?
Hi, everyone. For those of you who aren't already on Goodreads, we're the world's largest site for readers and book recommendations. We have more than 25 million readers around the world, and we also have more than 100,000 authors on the site, including both Sarah and Jennifer, so we're so excited to have you here today. And so you can follow them on Goodreads and see what they're reading, so you should check that out. I thought I'd kick us off and ask both of these authors if you could give us a quick synopsis of your new book and tell us how you came up with the idea. Sarah, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Good morning, and thank you so much for having us here today. So Catching Air, my new book, is a story of two very different women who are married to brothers. And they're both at kind of a crossroads in their life. They decide to move together, these two couples, to small town Vermont to run a bed and breakfast together. And while they're there trying to get this new business off the ground, a young woman comes to work for them. She's very mysterious, she doesn't talk a lot, and it's very clear she is running from something. But what these two sisters-in-law don't know is that she is also running from someone.
Jennifer?
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so All Fall Down is the story of Allison White, who has what looks like the perfect life. She's gotten her happy ending. There's a ring on her finger. She's got a cute little daughter, big house in the suburbs, fun job blogging for a lady website called ladiesroom.com, which I'm shocked that doesn't exist already. And then I was like, is this? I had to check and make sure there wasn't an actual ladies' room. I don't know why there's not. Anyhow, Allison has this amazing-looking life, but there's a lot of stress involved, and things are maybe not as perfect as they look on the outside. Her husband's kind of stopped talking to her. Her daughter's a handful. Her father's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and she has prescription painkillers that she's been prescribed for an injury, and she starts taking them to sort of ease her through the day a little bit. The same way a woman would have a glass of wine at the end of the night, or maybe go for a run at the end of the day, except Allison tells herself it doesn't stain and I don't get sweaty. And one pill becomes two pills, and two pills become four pills, and before you know it, she's buying prescription painkillers online and has a real problem, even as she's telling herself that she's not an addict, she's not one of those people. And anyone who knows, anyone who reads the paper, anybody who picks up People magazine, we know this is a huge, huge problem, particularly for women. And we know that addiction isn't the homeless guy on the street corner drinking out of a paper bag anymore. It's the woman next to you at the yoga class or behind you checking out Whole Foods. So that's where this story came from.
Well, you both kind of hit on, or led me into the next question, which is both of the books kind of start at a point where other people dream of, you know, I'm this big-time blogger, you know, I have a big house, I have a successful husband, and in the other case, you know, I'm leaving my stressful life behind to go open up a B&B. But that's really where the drama begins in your book. So what was it that interested you in kind of, you know, blowing apart the myth of happily ever after? You know, it's not really that happy at happily ever after. Jennifer, you want to start us out?
I will take that question. I mean, as a writer, I'm always interested in the idea of authenticity and the idea that something can look good, or it can be the thing that you are told to want, that you are trained your entire life to go for, and then you get it, and it's like, is this really what I wanted? Does this really feel the way that I thought it would? Is there anything more for me? And I think that's something that so many women grapple with on a really visceral, personal level. We as women have more choices than any generation has ever had. We can get married, we can not get married, we have kids in our 20s, in our 30s, in our 40s, have the big job, put the big job off. But every one of those choices comes with a trade-off and comes with guilt. And we, as women, we internalize so much of that guilt. We put so much pressure on ourselves. And, I mean, these were all questions I was interested in exploring. Ideas about authentic happiness, ideas about trade-offs, ideas about guilt, and ideas about how do you cope with having it all.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
Yeah, I think Jen made a terrific point, and I think that, you know, a lot of times we don't reveal our own vulnerabilities to one another. When we go on Facebook, we're seeing people's wonderful vacation photos and their kid getting some medal at school, and we're seeing all of these great triumphs. When we talk to each other, we generally, in a superficial conversation, hi, how are you doing? Everything's great. We don't really delve into the problems that everybody is carrying around. Everybody has a struggle, right? And so getting into that in fiction is so rewarding, and it's one of the reasons I like to write fiction and to read fiction. And I just want to say, because Jen is very modest and probably will not mention this, that her new book, All Fall Down, which is out today, is, I think, getting among the best reviews. You know, of any book recently. It's gotten starred reviews from Booklist and Library Journal. I think the Philly Inquirer said it was her best book. And I think part of that is that it really gets into these struggles that women are having. You know, a lot of us are just feeling so tightly wound, so overstressed, so overscheduled, and it captures that perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was saying earlier that we have a little term in our office we call glam washing, which is when people only put out, you know, the glamorous and the good things that are happening in their lives on Facebook, and really behind the scenes, it's like madness.
Yeah. It's so prevalent, and it's like, I tell people, like, this is a book about addiction. This is a book where our character goes to rehab. I don't want it to feel like an after-school special. I don't want it to feel like a message book where I'm, like, thumping you over the head with how to live your life better or whatever. But I think what you're talking about, the thing that happens on Facebook, is a real problem. And, like, I want to do my part in correcting it. I mean, I will tell you guys, like, people are just like, you know, how do you do it? And I'm like, I have so much help you wouldn't even believe it, and my house is still a mess. And I mean, I think we need to, like, be honest about it, because, you know, if everybody's making it all look good and you're the only one feeling like you haven't figured it out, what does that do to you? And what does it do if every day all you see are sort of everything through a filter, where it's somebody who looks better, whose husband is more successful, whose kids are doing better in school, who's lost the baby weight, whatever it is. I mean, I think that, like, we as women have got to stop beating ourselves up, and we've got to stop sending these messages into the world that are causing other women to beat themselves up.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But Jessica, you have a question for the ladies.
I do, and it really follows from everything that they were just talking about how do you cope with everything. At the beginning of Catching Air, Kira, she's looking for an escape. She has this stressful law career. And All Fall Down, Allison is also stressed. She's juggling work. She's juggling parenting. She turns to pills. So what is at the root of this? Is it modern life? Is modern life too fast? Is it getting unhealthy for us all? Is it no longer human scale? Like, what is causing this?
I will take that question. You know, it goes back to the thing I was saying before about we as women having more choices. And I think that for men, in a way, it's easier. You're going to go to school, you're going to get the job, you're going to be the breadwinner, and you're not going to feel that bad if you missed a soccer game, because that's not really your job. But for women, it's evolved so fast where, you know, the feminists of the 70s said we were all supposed to become the men that we would want to marry, and then marry that man also. So it's like, you have both the big job and all of the duties and responsibilities of being a great parent, of having the house look good, of keeping yourself looking good, which is important. And I think we agonize over the trade-offs. We agonize over the moments that we miss. Shonda Rhimes, who does Grey's Anatomy and owns Thursday Nights, gave this brilliant commencement in Dartmouth where she talked about every victory comes with some kind of heartbreak. Like, you got the best ratings for the best show you ever wrote, but you missed your kid's first words. And men, I think, you know, sure, they feel sad, but not maybe that sad, or not as sad as a mother does, because we're the mother. We're supposed to be there. And I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like there is just, for a certain class of women, for a woman sort of at a certain moment in this world, there's so much pressure, and I don't know if we're all handling it well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think part of it also is perspective? Because I sometimes feel that way, where it's like, oh, I'm going to miss this. Are they going to hate me forever? And then, of course, they're really sad about it that day and the next day, and then a week later, they kind of don't remember it anymore, you know?
My joke is that we're the first generation that uses parent as a verb. You know, like our mothers, my mother, I will speak for my mother, Fran, who loved her 4 kids, but boy, oh boy, was she not going to fill every moment of our lives with enriching new experiences. It was go play and I'll call you in for dinner.
Yeah.
Mothers don't do that anymore, at least not the moms I know. I mean, for one thing, you can't just let your kids go out and play because molesters. But also, I think that we internalize this idea that, like, there has to be a class, there has to be an experience, there has to be a trip, we have to take them somewhere. I mean, like, I can count on, like, the fingers of both hands how many times I went to children's museums as a kid. And my kids, it's like, we're members, we go every weekend, that is their normal. And I sort of, my mother looks at me like I'm crazy. And sometimes I think maybe I am, because, like, isn't there a way to, like, lighten up a little bit and, like, let the kids, like, raise themselves a little bit instead of, like, us micromanaging and helicoptering over every single moment? But then it's like, do you want to be the only parent in your circle who, like, for example, lets the kid watch the bus stop by themselves? I mean, like, I have an 11-year-old, I think she's ready, but, like, she could be the only kid without a parent there every morning. And do I want to be that parent? So, again, pressure, stress, peer pressure, what everybody else is doing, and the way the world has changed. And even just the little things, like, so few of us grow up in the same places as our extended family. So there's not that resource of, like, a mom who can step in or a sister who can step in. The world is different now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Uh-oh, I think we need to figure this out. But Sarah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Jen. I remember, too, a very similar childhood to being playing outside with all the neighborhood kids until the street lights came on. That was the signal to go home. And it's not that way anymore. There are very few kids out and around on the neighborhood kind of setting their own rules, making up their own games, the sort of things that we grew up with. And in terms of the stress and the pressure, I think one piece of it is that we all feel so accountable nowadays. If I am not checking my email via my cell phone every couple of hours, I feel a little bit guilty. Maybe I missed an important note. I feel like the cell phone always has to be on if there's an emergency at school. So there is a sense that we always need to be plugged in, which is a little bit, I think, dangerous to us and to our psyches.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Hannah, you have a question for the ladies.
Yes. I wanted to ask a little bit about the relationships in the book. We talked a little bit about glam washing and the pressures of modern life. And obviously, in both your books, there are secrets in all of the marriages. Allie discovers that Dave has turned to this work wife in All Falls Down. And Kira and her husband, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name, Peter, they are not honest with each other about their motivations for moving to Vermont. And I just wanted to ask, do you think this is a common thing in marriage nowadays? Can it ever be a kindness to your partner, or is it always unhealthy? And sort of what is behind the glam washing in what should be your closest, most trusted relationship? Do you want to start us off, Sarah?
Sure, yeah, and I'm not sure so much if it's a deliberate secret keeping or if this goes along with what we've been talking about, which is how fractured and busy all of our lives are, and if it's just a simple matter of not communicating because there doesn't seem to be enough time after the day of school and the homework's done and the house is clean and the dog is walked and you've done 100 emails and everything else you need to get done. Is there really time to have clear communication with people? I know that I have a friend I've been trying to have coffee with, and it's sort of ridiculous that we've had to reschedule it 3 times. But unfortunately, that's sort of the reality, and trying to pull back from that, I think, is very important. And I think it's why women look for an escape sometimes. And whether it's Allison looking for the escape in pills, or Kira and her sister-in-law Alyssa looking for the escape by moving to a small town and running their own business and having a quieter sort of life, I think that's very appealing to a lot of us nowadays.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Jen?
I think it's hard to tell someone else what you want when you haven't figured it out for yourself. And I think that that's what Allison in my book is dealing with, is sort of, and the characters in Catching Air as well, is sort of, when you have the thing you thought you were supposed to want, the thing that the world has sort of endorsed and signed off on, the big job at the law firm or the big house in the suburbs, whatever it is, and you can't quite come to grips with it yourself, that it doesn't feel right for you, I think that's a real hard thing. And then the idea that you're going to like share that with a partner, it's so much easier, I think, just to stay on the superficial level and sort of deal with like, are we out of milk and did we renew the car insurance and stuff like that. And that's the hole that Allie sort of falls down with her husband Dave.
Okay.
Jessica, you have a couple of questions from Goodreads readers.
I do. We were able to ask both Jennifer and Sarah's fans to send us questions. Really big response. First, I have a question for Sarah from a fan named Katie. She asks, how does your background as a journalist help you as a novelist? And do you still try to cover current events, but in your storytelling?
I love this question. Yeah, actually, Jen and I both worked for newspapers before turning to fiction, and I loved being a reporter. I loved most interviewing ordinary people. I wasn't as into interviewing politicians, which they had me do quite a bit. I much preferred ordinary people because I feel like everybody has an extraordinary story to tell, a very personal, extraordinary story. And reporting, getting to find out about people's lives was something I adored. And so when I turned to fiction, I began reporting as part of the background for each novel I was writing. So for example, with Catching Air, I read books about opening a bed and breakfast. I talked to some people who had done so, went in on chat rooms to get a little more information. And it ended up being really helpful because I learned a lot of things that ended up in the book. For example, I learned that a health inspector will do surprise visits at any establishment that serves food. So, of course, naturally, a health inspector is going to turn up at my character's B&B at the worst possible moment. But that never would have happened. That scene wouldn't have happened without the reporting behind it.
I know, Jennifer, Sarah mentioned that you're a reporter also. Do you also do this kind of background research?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think that being a journalist gives you great work habits for being a novelist. You meet your deadlines. You don't get all romantic about revising. You just sort of do the work. You don't wait for your muse to whisper in your ear, because my joke is like, you know, well, that story on the sewage board hearing isn't done yet because my muse has not spoken to me. And you have an editor saying, you and your muse need to get
to go home.
So,
Yes.
Exactly. You and your muse can go elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, I did the same kind of work. I talked to people. I visited treatment centers. I read some great, really eye-opening books about rehab and recovery, and specifically women in recovery. Yeah, and again, it's like the stuff you learn really ends up informing your story. I mean, I was really surprised to learn that rehabs are not as regulated as I thought they'd be, and that you're not necessarily being treated by people with the level of training that you'd expect. At lots of places, the people that are sort of doing the day-to-day business of treating people are called recovery coaches, and a lot of times the main qualification that these people have is that they're in recovery themselves. So we're not talking therapists, we're not talking degrees, we're just talking sort of people who've been through it. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes those people are great, but sometimes they could be stocking shelves at Walmart. You know, it's just a job for them. Wow. So it was interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Jessica, you had one more question for Jennifer, I think.
I can take that on too. So what we've been seeing a lot on our social media, and also this question on Goodreads, it's kind of what a lot of people have been asking the same thing for Jennifer. So if you've read your books before, people might be expecting hilarious reading. That's sort of your trademark, but this book might come as a huge surprise to them, and it's not for the faint of heart. And another social follower said, it gave me a suburban wife panic attack. And I thought that was kind of funny. So would you agree that this has a grittier tone than your previous books, and what brought you to this point?
Here's the thing. I mean, I've always said, like, this book is rehab with laughs. And I think that it's very much a piece with my previous work. Like, Allison is, even as she is, like, licking the felt of her jewelry box for that last crumb of vitamin, she's funny. And she's self-aware, and she's sort of, like, making jokes the whole the whole time through it. So I think that she's going to feel very familiar to anybody who's fallen in love with one of my previous heroines. She is a dark, funny, sarcastic, wide open, very observant lady. So, I mean, yeah, I think this book does go to some dark, gritty places. It deals with something that's very, very real and that has touched a lot of families and has touched a lot of people. But at the end of the day, like, I want this book to be good company. I want it to be something you can enjoy at the beach, you can take on a plane trip, you can go to the hospital if God forbid you're there. So is it a radical departure? Like, am I trying to write a million little pieces? No. I think that this is, and reviewers are really saying this is one of my best books, which I'm thrilled about. So it's dark, but it's funny too. And I hope that people aren't going to be like shocked or freaked out. I mean, I would say, you can read the first chapter. It's on my website. It's on Amazon. The Today Show just posted it. So go take a look and see if it's for you.
Okay, great. Hannah?
Yeah, I have one more question. It's sort of geared towards you, Jennifer, but we'd love to hear from both of you on it. Jen, you're known for being a strong voice in the debate over the worthiness of women's fiction. Just last week there was an article and an uproar about whether or not adults should be reading YA. Why do you think people have this compulsion to criticize what other people read and sort of shame them? Do you guys ever hide what you're reading when you're in public if you're embarrassed about it?
I have a Kindle, so it's all Anna Karenina. It's all. That's all I read. I don't know what's going on with that. I mean, the thing that struck me about that Slate article about YA is it's like, oh, somebody took an article about chick lit from 2003 and just crossed out chick lit and wrote in YA and heaped on some extra scorn and printed it. For whatever reason, if there are books that are popular, if there are books that are accessible, if there are books that perhaps stick to a certain formula, I don't think YA does, but that's a whole nother conversation. But like, if there are those books, guaranteed there will be somebody to say that those books are no good, the people reading them are no good and ought to be ashamed, and the people writing them are no good and ought to be ashamed. And this has gone on since Nathaniel Hawthorne bitched about the damned mob of scribbling women who were writing bestsellers while he was perhaps getting whatever the equivalent of the New Yorker review was in those days. I think that some of it's gendered. I really, really do. I think that you look at who is reading YA and it's women, it's young women. You look at who loved chick lit and it's women, and I think that there's something there. And the Slate piece was written by a woman, but I think that there's perhaps some like internalized misogyny going on there, where there's something like, well, this can't be any good. This can't be worth anything. It's girl stuff. Because I think that all of us, we grew up reading our Norton anthologies where it was like, dude, Jane Austen, where excellence was male, and maybe there would be a woman who'd sort of sneak into the canon every now and again, but we're conditioned to sort of like, if we think of the great American novelist, it wears pants, and I think that there's so much we can talk about here. There's entrenched double standards, there's internalized misogyny, there's everyone loves to judge, right? I mean, everybody loves to be like, ooh, this were a bad decision. I mean, like, there's something really human about that, and I get that. But I just, the idea that we're going to make readers feel bad for what they're reading is bananas to me. I don't get that at all.
Yeah. I know in our last book club meeting, one of the Goodreads readers asked if there was anything that fans could do to,
right.
Is there anything that readers can do to kind of change the perception of these genres?
I believe that there is. I mean, first of all, like, be like out and proud about what you're reading. Like, I joked about like my Kindle and like hiding my shame, but like tell people, like, if you loved The Goldfinch, say I loved The Goldfinch. If you read Jennifer Weiner or Sarah Pekkanen or whoever it is that you're in love with, like, own it and say so on social media. I mean, post a great review on Amazon, tweet what you're reading, check in on Goodreads and say, I'm 241 pages into this book and I love it. And then, like, make some noise. I mean, the beauty of our modern world is that, like, everybody's on Twitter, including editors at The New Yorker and the Paris Review and Harper's and The Atlantic and all of the places with dismal Vita numbers, the places that are publishing 3 short stories by men to everyone by a woman, or reviewing 4 books by men and 1 book by women. And anyone can get on Twitter and say, what up? Why is this happening? Is it really that there's no fiction by women worth publishing? What is going on here? Like, ask the questions. I mean, like, because I've got daughters, and I'm really, really determined. If either one of them is going to be a writer, I would like them to have an easier time of it and not have to do the thing of, like, everything Fred Astaire did, only backwards and in heels, and jump extra hurdles to prove that what they've written has any worth at all. I want the assumption going in to be like, this has worth, whether a girl wrote it or a boy did.
Absolutely, and I would just like to say, I love young adult fiction. I read it all the time. I'm a proud reader of young adult fiction. I will keep reading it, and I think it's such a shame when people are trying to be snobbish about, whatever it is, a certain type of fiction, and they discourage people from reading. We need to get people reading more, not less. So please, celebrate, like Jen said, celebrate whatever you're reading, encourage other people, ask them about it. And I'm wondering if the critics of this type of fiction, I wonder how much they've actually read, because there's some great books out there.
Well, that's what I always think, when they're bashing these books. I'm always like, well, have you read it? Because you found nothing worthwhile in these books, really? You didn't find any of them entertaining? But anyway, we have one last question. It's almost time for us to run. And what we want to know is, what books will you be celebrating this summer? What can you not wait to read that's coming out and everybody else should put on their reading list? Jen, go ahead. Or Sarah.
I'll go first. Okay, so Roxane Gay wrote a book called Bad Feminist, and it's an essay collection about everything from rape culture to Orange is the New Black to it's about books, it's about movies, it's about the culture, and it sounds, again, like a huge downer, and it's not. It's so smart and entertaining and provocative, and oh my God, there's so much to think about. I mean, whether it was that shooting in California, the debate about the goldfinch, and, like, is this book that just won the Pulitzer, is it art? Like, why are we having this conversation? I mean, Roxane Gay wrote Bad Feminist, and she also has a novel called An Untamed State that I cannot recommend highly enough. So that's what I'm recommending for the summer.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
I'm recommending After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's her second book, and I really fell in love with her first book, Forever Interrupted. So I just got an advanced copy of After I Do. It's a story of a couple who are going through a really difficult time in their marriage, and so they decide to take off a year. And they only have one rule, which is that they can't contact each other during this year. And at the end of the year, they're going to meet to see if their relationship can be salvaged.
Wow.
I have to say, I read After I Do, and it's really good. That's one of the advantages of being a book editor. But Jennifer and Sarah, thank you for chatting with us so much. We really appreciate it. Go to redbookmag.com/beach reads to find out how you can submit questions for the third hangout for our Summer Beach Reads Book Club, which will be happening on July 17th. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you.